At the A4ID climate change event on Tuesday the 25th of September 2012, Dr. Swenja Surminski discussed the legal and regulatory environment in which microinsurance operates and the legal needs of stakeholders.
Swenja Surminski, and despite the warning that there might be some interactive elements, I'm glad that nobody has left the room, so stay with me and don't fear, it's not going to be anything too difficult, but I just thought, after a long day, maybe something to sort of wake you up a bit and get you involved in this. I work just basically across the road here at the London School of Economics. I used to work in the insurance industry myself for 10 years, and then I decided that it's time to sort of swap sides and really try and leave any baggage behind and just analyze what's actually going on. And my focus is on climate risk, extreme weather, disaster, risk reduction. So I'm sort of working on a lot of these topics that were raised today, but I don't have a legal background. So, but I'm trying to sort of reflect on this in terms of, the legal implications. And that's where also the interactive element will come in. So I'm actually hoping to benefit from your legal cloud here. So that should be quite an interesting exercise, I think. Just to sort of reflect on what some of the speakers referred to. Usually when you have sort of climate change and legal issues sort of in one sentence, you come to this question of liability and attribution. And we've heard a lot about this. And I'm not going to sort of get further into this, but I think just to sort of highlight a recent experience, 2 weeks ago, I was involved in a workshop in Oxford, where a lot of the climate scientists gathered and sort of discussed this idea of attribution. And amongst all these climate scientists, there was one law professor from the University of Houston in Texas. And he made a really interesting comment that scared half of the scientists, but you could see with the other half of the group, you could see sort of the dollar signs in their eyes. So his comment was, no matter what you think in terms of, is the science going to really develop and on attribution, on our understanding, no matter what will happen, there is definitely a trend that, sort of the aspect of litigation and liability will really need science advice on the defense and science advice in terms of making a case. So his comment to all these scientists was, you get your act together, you check what sort of evidence will be accepted in courts. And when you do that, that's kind of your contribution to the big debate. So as I said, half of the scientists got really scared. Said, no, we don't want to have anything to do with that. And, our science is far too complex. We're not going to make any statements in whatsoever direction. The other side, I felt, were quite sort of inclined to say, oh, yeah, there is definitely an opportunity for us to sort of contribute and play a part. So I think, just as a comment here, and I know you had Miles speaking at a previous event. So, that's something where I think that interaction, science and the legal community will not go away, and we'll see more of that. So to come to the question, we heard a lot about this idea of loss and damage. And fortunately, I don't have to give you the background because we can sort of rely on what the previous speakers have been talking about. And for some strange reasons, and there are lots of different explanations for this, but there's no unique or agreed definition. For some reason, this concept of loss and damage has achieved sort of the level of being sort of an official work program. And I say strange because you ask around experts and they all come with different explanations of why we have it. And everybody has a different understanding. So that's the part of the fun there. I was actually involved myself in writing a report for the UNFCCC earlier this year and trying to identify what is our understanding of loss and damages and what tools can we use to assess the risk levels. And I think first big challenge of this work was actually what is loss and damage? Where are the boundaries? Where does loss start, damage stop, and all that? So we decided, if we really want to go to the bottom of that, we're going to be spending a lot of time on this. So we kind of came up with a roughly workable definition, but I think, that discussion has not ended. So, we have this concept there, and there's this idea that insurance could be part of a solution. And we heard, what form that could take. We learned a lot about microinsurance. There are obviously different other aspects. So let's just sort of take this. There is this political concept of work and loss and damage. And in there is this idea that insurance, risk transfer, could play a part in finding a solution. So that's kind of where we are. Why is insurance so attractive? I've written down a couple of reasons. I don't want to go into detail, although I love discussing this because I'm not convinced that insurance is really the most effective solution, but let's park that for the moment. So the question is, if we take insurance as a potential solution, how could this work? And we've seen microinsurance, but we also notice that there are different sort of stakeholders that have different interests. So to sort of step back, I just thought I'd try and sort of reflect on the current situation and what context, where sort of climate change comes in from sort of what I'm specifically work on. Last year, I set up a database that actually tries to gather evidence of existing insurance products that are being sold in developing countries that focus on weather risks. So we sort of did this. I think at the moment the database contains about 140 examples across the world. There's just to illustrate where they are, and they have different forms and shapes. Microinsurance is there, property insurance, sovereigns, agriculture. So a really broad bag. I think the main comment here, and I don't have time to go into detail, is, all of them are really focusing on today's risk. That's sort of a one-year contract, today's risk. What we have just been thinking about and what the UNFCCC is discussing is sort of climate change. So, there are sort of two sides of, they're obviously related, but, today's risk and trying to deal with that and then bringing in climate change, that changes the whole sort of debate. And hence my question, to what extent are these current products that are being tested, piloted, are they really suitable to deal with these rising risk levels? Are they really suitable to deliver of what we were just hoping to see as solution to loss and damage? So as part of that study, we sort of looked at that. And I think the key aspect from my point of view, when you ask me to what extent insurance and risk transfer can play a role in managing the impacts of the loss and damage of climate change, is this aspect of reducing risk. Because if you take, just in strict terms, insurance is just sort of a financial risk transfer. So, you get compensation, but your underlying risk doesn't necessarily change. So, you get compensated, but, in fact, the same could happen tomorrow and you might get compensated again. So there is not necessarily any sort of risk reduction involved. So insurance has sort of promoted risk reduction. And if you sort of look back over the centuries, in fact, insurers came up with the idea of fire services to sort of help this problem that, we want to work on risk prevention, risk reduction. So there's kind of a tradition. But if you ask me personally, I think we're far away from actually utilizing this aspect of linking risk reduction and this financial risk transfer. And to me, that's really important if we're talking about rising risk levels in the context of climate change. So that's kind of a starting point, I think. And I know that there are ideas, and I think Aaron mentioned this concept that the Munich Climate Insurance Initiative came up with, and they had these elements. There is a dimension of risk reduction, like flood prevention measures, and only above a certain level, insurance kicks in. So, to me, that seems to be the right approach, because insurance alone, can't really deal with this. And even in the UK, where we have relatively high penetration of insurance, it's about 75% of people are insured against flood, and that's really high. That's kind of, it doesn't get much higher across the world. But even here, insurance isn't the solution to it. It's part of it. We still need flood defenses. We still need flood risk management plans and so on. So the trick here is, I think, to link this. And we investigated these existing risk transfer schemes and sort of looked at them. And there's very little direct connection to risk reduction at the moment. I've sort of highlighted some. So I think that's kind of a message going forward. That link needs to be much stronger. And I don't have time to sort of go into detail, but I think that's an important aspect. And the other sort of last comment I want to make is this observation that we just had in our discussion, the importance of regulation. Part of sort of one of my other big projects at LSE is to try and quantify sort of political, legal, and regulatory drivers in when it comes to sort of the growth of an industry or the growth of a sector. At the moment, people give sort of qualitative statements about, yes, legal and institutional frameworks are very important. Property rights are very important for the development of a sector in a country. Let's take the insurance again as an example. But can we quantify it? Can actually somebody tell you how important it is to have the right regulatory setup? Can you come up with some numbers there? And that's really difficult, and I won't bore you with any sort of econometric assessments that are being tried there. But I think what I found, my sort of first observation is, I find it quite scary that we're not really in a position to pin down sort of regulatory impacts. You take a regulatory measure, you liberalize a market, let's say in China, but you can't really pin down what exactly is the effect of a certain sector in that country. And the same goes with policies. Certain policies are being discussed, eventually implemented, but can you really sort of say, okay, that's sort of the point in time, that's when this decision was made, and here that was the kickstart of growth in a certain sector that led to all these new products. It's really difficult to go from anecdotal evidence to actually quantifying that. And I think that is something that that would be important to actually then achieve better decision making. And that's sort of the other aspect there, to sort of try and quantify, how important are these legal drivers and what impact can they have? So I think that was sort of my last comment here. Thanks.